Welcome to the show, Sean. It sounds like we got a lot of synergies in our background. So why don't we start there? Tell people about your background and what you're doing today, and let's dive into this conversation.
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Sean Campbell. I'm the CEO of a firm called Cascade Insights. I've owned it since 2006, and we've been kind of steadily growing since then. And prior to that, I also owned a professional services firm called Three Leaf Solutions that I grew and sold. And so this is kind of my second, trip through the professional services side. I've also had the opportunity to grow a lot of practice areas in firms. Over the years, we've kind of started out doing one thing and kept doing that well. And then we've added another practice area and grown that. So that's something I'm happy to talk about. I've got a pretty big passion for sales and marketing excellence when it comes to professional services firms. So that's another thing I'd be happy to chat about. And then finally, in terms of the shared background, our company only works with B2B tech. And by that, we mean software and hardware companies, and we do research projects for them, and we also do marketing work for them. And so interestingly enough, as we were talking in the pre-chat, we've done a lot of work for partner program leaders inside those companies, like doing research on their channel. We talk to partners all the time about what they like and don't like about their partners and things like that. So happy to chat about any and all those things. And last thing is on any kind of personal note, some folks are curious about that. I've got 2 kids. They're both teenagers. And so they play lots of Call of Duty and I hang out with them. We do lots of skiing, camping, hiking, live in Oregon. My wife's a wonderful person. We've been married almost 25 years and originally grew up in Chicago. Folks might say he's not quite an Oregonian all the way. And that's because I've got a Chicago heritage, but that's basically the backstory.
And what part of Oregon you?
Outside of Portland, Oregon. So a little town called Oregon City, which is literally where the Oregon Trail ended. That's literally that my town is literally where it ended. There's a museum in the town. So for those back east who played the game or kids or who knows what, I'm literally living at the end of it, like the physical end of it.
Okay. And these research projects you do for some of the partner groups, you want to do some name drop and let them know so they can maybe connect some of the audience with some of the vendors that you're working with?
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty decent list. I mean, Dell, we do a bunch of work with their partner teams and have over the years. We've done work with IBMs in the past. Microsoft has a long history of us doing partner work and research for their teams. AWS, a little less so, but that's a little bit more just about differences in how AWS goes to market. But we've done stuff for AWS. And then obviously those are some of the bigger names, but we've also worked with a lot of mid-market SaaS companies who also want to build out partner ecosystems. And those might align with a vertical like healthcare or manufacturing or things like that. So it's a pretty long history. And I think the partner network stuff is always really fascinating because let me put it this way. Both sides to some degree don't understand each other. That's my understanding of watching this from the inside, right? Sometimes I'll make this short in case you don't want to chat about this, but on the enterprise software company side, they tend to think about things to offer that don't typically actually incent partners. And at the same time, the partners sometimes have some very outsized impressions of what the vendor can actually do for them. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And on top of that, you got all the changes that cloud brought to this relationship. Compared to 10 or 15 years ago and how these things played out. So it's an area that we keep plumbing because it just keeps changing. And so our clients keep wanting us to ask questions in that area.
Well, it seems I've been in the computer industry now for, I think, 35 years or something like that. I forget. It's too long. But it seems like there's a big disconnect in signing up partners if you want to do a partner network type of thing, versus having people who actually go out and sell your product and make something happen. So what do you find, how do people do that more successfully? I mean, if we've got some people in our audience that want to work through, because I think a lot of the things that you're going to talk about also apply if you really want to build a referral network or some other type of network to kind of really grow. How do you make it work when you've got the right people in your partner network or whatever you want to call it, versus just a bunch of companies or a bunch of people?
Well, yeah, there's a bunch of things in what you said. I mean, one, like I said a minute ago, a lot of times we find that the vendors, they try to generate things that don't necessarily motivate the partners. They're like, well, let me give you 10% off on this, or give you a little spiff if this happens, or all that kind of thing. And most of the time the partner, what they care about is growing market share, which for them is an order of magnitude more valuable than whatever discount they get off something. So sure, an IT shop might say, hey, buy HP laptops from us. And that's what they're going to push over Lenovo's or Dell's or whatever, because they get a little extra from it. But here's the funny thing. Even with our new IT supplier we onboarded, all we had to say to the guy was, well, we want Microsoft Surfaces and Macs. And he's never going to offer us an HP box again, ever. Because we're an Apple shop, and we're a Dell shop, and we're a Surface shop. And so I think you've got some partner manager inside HP who's saying, like, I know my plans for world domination are going to be secured by offering 3% more off this laptop. And at the end of the day, that really doesn't actually change things. What the partner wants is the vendor to kind of create mind share and basically a playing field that the partner can play on. Because at the end of the day, that partner is driven by what their customers want, not what the vendor wants. And so a lot of times these partner channel managers don't spend time there. They spend time designing these really weird program structures that have all like the precious metal partner levels. I say sometimes, the gold, silver, platinum, whatever. And they have all these different tiers, and they're all proud of themselves. They made this PowerPoint deck that has all these rows in it and everything else like that. And at the end of the day, none of that's actually motivating the partners. They're signing up, sure, because why not? They get free stuff for doing that. So there's issues there. On the partner side, I think the issues are, they think that the vendor, and I see this sometimes, the vendor can somehow like make magic happen for them. They can connect them to suppliers and people and connections that like they've never had before. And here's where we may or may not agree. I've told businesses for a long time that you should trap your referral revenue into, particularly services firms, into a fairly small pile. Because I wish there was a better way to say it, but it's true. When the economy gets tough, people hold on to their own leads. They don't just go willy-nilly call everybody and say, hey, I've got a hot lead. What you actually have happen, which is bad for a different reason we could get into, is that supplier goes ahead and says, I know that's not in my lane, and I know I had a partner that was in their lane, but maybe we should just do it instead, right? And so this referral network starts to kind of destroy itself when the economy gets tough, because you don't really have the same amount of fluidity in that network because everybody's trapped and holding on to those things. So I say all that because, and this happens all the time. We even have people come in and do research, want us to do research for them on this. I'll give you a concrete example. This guy calls me earlier this year in the throes of COVID, in terms of its economic impact, like Q3. And he's like, I don't know what to do. We don't have work anymore. It's like a 10-person MSP, got all this work like crazy, had a huge referral network, dried up, used to get leads from the vendor, dried up, and now he's like, I don't know what to do. I guess we'll go invest in marketing. And the sad thing I wanted to tell him was, it's going to take you like 6 months to a year for that marketing to really, really start generating stuff. He doesn't really know how to do that. And on top of that, as you and I probably both know, and then I'll wrap up with this, like a lot of smaller partners, MSPs, and I know there are exceptions, but a lot of them were builders who did one good project after another, after another, after another. None of them know how to sell. None of them know how to have a sales process. And they think marketing's like made up stuff that nobody buys. So they find themselves in these horrible coffin corners, like they say about aircraft at times, hitting a Mach number, right? That's probably too geeky of a reference for most of the listeners, but go look up coffin corner if you want to know. And so they end up in these boxes that they can't get out of anymore. And then their business dies while they're trying to get out of it. So I know there's a ton there, but that's some of the things I've seen like on the vendor side that are problematic, some I've seen on the partner side. And like I said, maybe it's a point of disagreement, but I think the referral network part of your business needs to be kind of carefully monitored, because if you let it get too big, you're really just working for somebody else. You're not even working for yourself anymore.
No, I think we're in agreement when it comes to vendors that you really need to limit the number of vendors you're getting referrals from or leads from. And you have to think, what does the vendor want from me? Well, the vendor wants that when they give you a lead, you close the lead.
Right.
They don't want to give you 10 leads and you close 1 out of 10 or none out of 10. If they're going to give you 10 leads, they'd like to see, 10 pieces of business out of that or as close to it as they can. Then when things dry up, they're still going to be going to you because you're delivering.
True. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Which is why in most partner networks, and you see this in every partner network I've ever seen, there's kind of these like partners who have this little extra special status. And it's not one of those precious metal status. It's exactly what you're talking about. That sales team for that vendor knows this company will convert for me. And they get the lion's share of the meaningful activity, and everybody else just gets dredges and scraps. And they stand out and they say, well, this isn't fair. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Sales is the ultimate meritocracy. It's not supposed to be fair. You know what I mean? Like nobody said it was fair. Right.
Yeah.
Let me correct that. It's not supposed to be equal. Actually, I think the meritocracy is fair. That's really what I meant to say, but it's not supposed to be equal. Yeah. So that's the problem. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it reminds me of the parable of the talents, actually, where the guy who was given 10 got more, and the guy who was given 5 got more because both of them delivered.
Right. And the guy that buried it under a rock or in the dirt, right? Jesus comes back and says, what's your problem? Right? Like, you should have done something with what you've been given. Right. And obviously that has more of a eschatological implication and religious implication on top of the business one, but there's plenty of business implication out of that too. So
yeah. And that's something to keep in mind as you do that referral network. So as you work with these different professional services firms and they want to grow, it seems like professional services firms in particular seem to hit walls. They can grow to 300,000 or 500,000 or a million can be a big number, and then 2.5 million, 5 million, 10 million, whatever it is. But they hit a wall. What are the ones that break through those walls doing differently than the ones that get stuck?
Well, there's a cluster of things, I would think, having watched us do it. But I would say, one, I always quote a book, The E-Myth Revisited, which you may have seen or whatever, but there's a line in it where the guy says, because I read this early in my business career, I'm 50 now, so I haven't been in tech quite as long as you, but I started in 95-ish, so long enough when we were using Hercules monochrome monitors, for anybody who knows what that is. So like,
I still have a Hercules Clone Smasher doll guy,
There you go. Yeah. I joke. I entered computers pre-color. That's what I tell people. So like I was pre-color at least. And so, anyway, I think one of the things in that book he says is that you need to stop working in your business and you need to start working on it. So the very first stumbling block, most small, like hyper small, like whether you quote it as revenue or employee count, I'll probably go by employee count because depending on your employee count and the industry you're in, your revenue could be very, very different based on how big you are, right? But let's say you're only 2 to 4 people. That's the problem there. The owner isn't taking enough time to stand back and work on the business, to actually like think, okay, my job is to hire people, not to be the person doing the work, right? Or my job is to build up systems. My job isn't to necessarily fill in every cell in a spreadsheet, right? Now, and there's always a little bit of a lie in every truth, right? The owner is always eventually going to be responsible for something that's uniquely theirs. Like some owners are going to kind of eventually own a piece of the business that they're really great at serving, right? It's like CEOs, even in big companies, right? They all have a little special sauce that they own in the end. So it's not like they just become these automatons that are running the business. But that's the first thing. I'll give you a second one and then you can direct me how you want. But I think the second one is that this is close to what we talked about earlier, but it is really one of the stumbling blocks. They don't really build a self-sustaining sales process. My dad used to say, who passed a while ago, but he had a hilarious analogy for an internal combustion engine. He said and I'm sure he stole it from somebody else, but he said you could summarize an internal combustion engine as suck, squeeze, bang, blow. And that was basically what an engine does. Those are the 4 major components of an engine. And so, it's got to suck in the air, right, et cetera. And so nobody builds a sales engine. What they do is they shuffle between doing a lot of work and hurrying to get a lot of work and doing a lot of work to get a lot of work. And what they don't do is they don't smooth that out. And that creates a tyranny later, because as the business gets bigger, those peaks and valleys become even more seismic, because all of a sudden everybody is busy, but nobody is trying to find work in the company, right? And then all of a sudden everybody is desperate to find work. That needs to smooth out, I would say, the minute you're past yourself. And you know, I could even make an argument you should do it when you're just solo. But that's a hard thing for most, especially in the MSP market we're talking about, because these are technologists. They like doing the work. So to stop and do these other business functions and actually carve off time to do it when they're even just themselves and a very small business is hard. So those are the first two, I think. And then I've got some others that show up a little bit later that we could talk about too.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. And the reason I paused and started writing something down, I didn't want you to think I was looking at a text or something.
No,
because I loved your line that there's, what did you say about a lie in every truth or something like that?
Right.
So there's a little lie in every truth. And it just struck me because, and we don't want to go down this rabbit trail, but I think that's something for business people to be aware of in the business as you're trying to make decisions. And, you know, you feel like you're pulled in two different directions. And we live in a very media intense environment now that can be very biased, that builds off partial truths. And either eliminating it altogether and just pitching their style, or taking part and exaggerating it because it is what they want to promote. But we can get caught in that as business people. You know, we want to be the tech. So we convince ourselves that we have to do that, and we have to be the lead tech, and we have to do this. And we don't pay attention to the other parts of the business that will enable us to grow. So that's, you know, we're taking that partial truth that, yeah, we might be the best tech at this moment and the best person as a result to grow that part of the business. But if we merely focus on that, we've exaggerated it out of reality, then we miss this other part that we need to address. So what about the company that hits 1 million or hits 2.5 million or whatever mark you want to hit? You know, whether they have 10 employees or 30 or whatever.
There's a few things there. I think there's the tyranny of middle management. And I almost fear that I said it that way without thinking, because my own middle managers are probably going to listen to this and be like, what in the world is he talking about? But like, there's like this crazy amount of coordination that all of a sudden starts to happen, right? Because, you know, one, you got to hire people that can actually supervise other people that by definition you don't talk to that much. And so whatever cult of personality you've established, whatever kind of motivational techniques you have, now you've delegated a bit of that. So now you have to manage people who manage other people. And some people just don't know how to do that, right? Or they pick the wrong people, and those people are such a just churn factory, right? Those middle managers that creates dismay, right? And the business kind of just doesn't get past that ever, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is, right there is also where marketing needs to happen. In the very beginning, and this may seem slightly heretical for an outfit that actually does marketing to say, but like, I think when you're really, really small, you need a limited amount of marketing. We used to joke in the early days, we had a website that existed to not disqualify us. You know what I mean? That was and I think here's why. Great marketing comes from really knowing what your clients want through a sales process. Specifically for B2B is what we're talking about here. You know, these MSPs, these are long sales cycles. They're complicated. There are many players involved. This is not a commodity sale. So you write great marketing messaging and great marketing content, and you put great blog posts out and all the good stuff that goes with SEO and pay-per-click on this super important kernel of great sales knowledge. Which unfortunately, what happens is these guys go hire a marketing firm and they say, go do it all for me. And they write these generic listicle posts that don't mean anything and nothing converts. And then they say, why did I spend all this money? And I said, because you didn't tie the two together the right way. Sales has to inform marketing, not the other way around. In B2B, I can make a counter argument for that in B2C, by the way. It's very different market dynamic in B2C. And we can get there if you want. But like, but anyway, the problem is marketing doesn't exist until too late. And so now a company that really needs a lead engine and they really need things, and they've started to add sellers who need leads and all this stuff. Now they're behind the 8 ball on that. But And then there's two other things that happen at 1 to 2 million. And they're kind of related. One is the company grow. I see this all the time. I'll ask business owners who have, let's say, $1 million company is like, I don't know, 8 consultants or something, right? Or maybe that's $1.5 million. And you say, hey, who do you work with? And they go, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And you say, hey, are any of those anchor accounts? Yeah, one of them. Yeah, we do a lot with so-and-so. Almost always, you know what that is? If you open up QuickBooks, it's 70% of their revenue. Like they've all sold themselves to like one large account, because I'll say that, and this is the death knell of these companies, because they get to like now 3 million and they're freaking out because 70% of their revenue is coming through one set of purchase orders, through one company, one relationship, one set of leads, and they're terrified they're going to screw up that relationship. Long before that, when they were like 500,000, they needed to be going out there saying, I don't care Soft. I don't care if you're Dell. I don't care who you are. You're going to get 20% of our pipe. That's it. And I'm going to go and pick a number. And I'd actually say it should be a little bit lower than that. But in the beginning, don't let anybody get over 20%. And yes, you'll start slower. And there'll be these moments where you'll be going, but I could be bigger if I just said yes. You're avoiding this nightmare later where you're just beholden. You're like a vassal state to this other company. And that's not the right way to fly. And so what happens then is these companies arc, that relationship devolves, and they crash. Yeah. And then I'd say the fourth thing I see happen in these 1 to 2 million, and this is kind of a corollary, is they start to lose focus. They start to be everything to everyone, because it starts to feel like, well, we can do that. Like one of the most dangerous things a business owner can do, I think, is say to their staff, hey, we have smart people. We can do it. That's like the dumbest thing to say. Like, you shouldn't just do it because you're smart. You should do it because it's your unique value prop. You have something unique to offer. You can find customers who are willing to take that from you at a lower total cost. Cost of acquisition. You can actually build good relationships off that, lead to new things. Good businesses, especially in services, are to some degree narrow, because, to finish this all off, people buy context. They buy the context you have. And the only way you can have that meaningfully when you're like 1 to 2 million is to be relatively narrow. So how does this lead to destruction? Well, they get wider and wider and wider. If we roll all this up, like the nightmare scenario, they're wider and wider and wider. They offer all these kinds of things. There's no differentiation. They got all their revenue coming from like 1 or 2 accounts. On top of that, their middle managers are driving them bonkers because they're either infighting or nobody knows what's going on. And meanwhile, the business owner hasn't ever really worked on the business. They're still throwing themselves into the innards of projects. That business won't be here in 2 years. And much less the owner probably like has health conditions when it's all over. And I don't even mean that like tongue in cheek. I mean, they probably don't really feel well. And all of it was avoidable. All of it.
Yeah. And part of it goes back to what you said a moment ago about, if your business is a commodity. And I think that if you feel that your business is a commodity, that's a major red flag. You need help right away, because unless you want to be Walmart, you can't compete in a commodity business, particularly as professional services. You got to have something that's unique. So that leads me, as we're kind of going towards our end of our podcast here.
Sure.
Talk to me about what you guys do great that could be helpful to our audience here. I'm really curious if you can kind of lay that out. What type of company is like an ideal client for you guys?
Yeah, I will. And let me put one little bow fairly quick on something we talked about. Like if I was to give a professional service firm owner of any kind the best advice they should follow that I wish I got earlier is tell people what you don't do. And if you don't have an answer to that, sit in your room and think about it until you do. Because if your natural temptation is to always say, well, I could and I can, that is the root of bad sales issues, bad marketing, bad messaging, and eventually a company that's going to have an issue. You have to figure out what the bounds are around what you offer. And to finish this off, services firms tend to not have bounds because it's services. It feels like if I'm a smart guy, I can kind of do anything in my space. And again, I just would say if you can put bounds around it, you have a much more sustainable business that in the long term actually grows faster, right? And that's the piece of advice I'd give. As far as us, one of the things that we do is that we help companies figure this stuff out. Like we go in and do research and we figure out, like sometimes I say it's for pain or opportunity. Like the pain is they're losing sales, they don't have good marketing, they want to understand the buyer's journey, they want to understand their buyers better, they want to do win-loss work because they're losing lots of deals. That's pain. Sometimes it's opportunity. They like bought another firm and they want to figure out how to make a lot of good use out of it. They want to grow in a new market, or they have a new offering that does make sense and applies well to their business. So we'll do research there. And then we turn around and we say, how can we help you message to the market better? How can we build a message that shows up in your marketing, in your sales conversations, in your content that you put out, so that, in the end, when people think of you, they go, I know exactly what that firm does, and I know what they don't do, and I know why I should hire them. And that's the kind of stuff we help out with. Whether it's a services firm or these big tech guys we talked about, that's the heart of what we do. Cool.
Well, if people want to learn more, where do they go, Sean? It sounds very interesting. Sounds beneficial. Sounds like something that would have saved me a lot of pain decades ago.
Well, if it makes listeners feel any better, remember I had a first business, and I probably should mention this in a full PSA. My first business got almost all of its revenue from Microsoft and Intel. So go figure. I learned that one the hard way. We had a 25-person company that the middle managers didn't get along. And I don't really stand for that right now. I get pretty, focused when that's not working right. We didn't fall into the trap of being too broad. I'll give us that. That was the one we didn't do. But that's what helped us sell it, actually. But anyway, long story short, it's not like I haven't made these mistakes either. So if folks want to learn more, they can just go to cascadeinsights.com. I'm out there on the internet for various things. I've been interviewed some other places, written some books. So if you look up my name in conjunction with Sean Campbell, you'll find me, and I'll always take an email. So just shoot me an email at sean@cascadeinsights.com. And thanks for having me on.
Hey, my pleasure, Sean. Thanks for the insights. This has been interesting. I'm going to look more at your stuff. Might have some things to do together. Thanks.